A woman's body is discovered in Bosham, a coastal village in Sussex, England.
When police arrived at the scene, they were met with a scene of unimaginable horror.
In one of the quietest areas in the country, it was one of the most shocking murders police had ever discovered.
She'd been brutally attacked.
She had been bludgeoned with a blunt instrument.
Investigators consider multiple avenues in their search for the killer.
Somebody has been murdered on their doorsteps and they haven't found out or have any leads, any more ongoing leads as to who may have done it.
Very worrying for everyone, and everyone's sort of, looking over your shoulder the whole time.
In an attempt to weed out the killer, the police organised a massive DNA collection programme throughout the village.
People would have been so shocked and horrified and eager to help that they were more than willing to give their DNA as part of this process.
You can't force somebody to give DNA. In this case, it's like the whole village wanted to turn up.
Bosham is a picturesque village on the southern coast of England in West Sussex, located about 3 miles south of Chichester and 5 miles from the English Channel.
Bosham is a village off the West Sussex coast. It's the kind of place where it gets a lot of tourists in the summer with this beautiful weather, and a lot of people from London own second homes there. It's pretty much a place where there's a lot of money about.
The beauty of Bosham is the fact that nothing ever happens there. It's quiet. Everybody knows each other's business. Some people might not like that, but when you're in a tiny fishing village, and I say fishing because most people have a fishing boat or a boat of some sort. Yes, it's known to be the place where a lot of people from London might have their second home, but it's never really got so big that you want to call it a town. It's virtually a hamlet, right, even rather than a village. But yes, it's idyllic. People want to live there. It's known for being so friendly. Nothing happens there.
The centre of the village is really the sailing, people making the most of being on the sea there.
Well, it was a quintessential English village, really. Not much really happens day-to-day basis, especially in the winter. Summer gets very busy, just tourists, etc. But yeah, that's a beautiful spot. A lot of visitors with the view, with the water. It's a beautiful place to live.
The people that reside in the village are typically affluent people, but it's just a nice, peaceful village that everybody seems to know everybody.
The village of Bosham is regarded as one of the safest areas in the UK, with its peaceful atmosphere and tight-knit community.
Bosham has extremely low rates of crime. In fact, at one stage, 6 months went by without a single crime being recorded. So crime is a very rare thing in Bosham.
It's the kind of place where crime literally doesn't happen. It can go months on end with no crime being reported at all, let alone murders, any crime.
We get the odd incident, the co-op occasionally will get broken into, but normally it would be nothing more than a bike getting nicked or some sort of low-level kids mucking around. So yeah, really, it's a relatively crime-free area.
No one's ever known of a car being stolen. It is a place where people want to go and visit.
But the peace of the quiet village is shattered just days after Christmas in 2013.
It was shortly before 10 a.m. on the morning of the 30th of December 2013 when Chichester police got a phone call to say that a woman had been found dead in her bed. It was apparent this woman had suffered some horrific injuries. That woman was Valerie Graves. When police arrived at the scene, they were met with a scene of unimaginable horror. This poor woman was found in her bed. She had been bludgeoned with a blunt instrument, basically. And police straight away started a murder investigation.
Investigators begin their murder inquiry by looking into the personal life of the victim.
Valerie Graves was originally from London. She got married to a man called Roy, who she met at a local pub. He was playing in a rock band. And Roy would later comment that Valerie never lost her childlike innocence and her childlike love of the world and of people.
She had 2 children, Tim and Jemima, who didn't live in the village but lived in London.
She was very much loved, very well thought of and very popular, and by all accounts a very nice person. She had went to Scotland where she undertook a degree in textiles and design at the Heriot Watt University in Edinburgh. She studied that in 2007. She lived in the Jedburgh area of Scotland, and after 10 years living in that town, she then made her way down south back to England to help care for her elderly mother. After her university experience, she opened a craft studio in Jedburgh where she was working as an artist.
Valerie was the mother, a grandmother, and close to her family.
On the night of the 29th of December, so a few days after Valerie's birthday, around 10 o'clock at night, the family all went to bed. And Valerie was staying on the ground floor, whereas the rest of the family were upstairs. On the following morning, on the 30th of December, Valerie's sister and her partner came down. Nigel went to the shops, and Jan noticed that the door to Valerie's bedroom was open. And she didn't really think an awful lot of it because she thought that maybe Valerie had gone to look after her mum and just forgotten to close it. And what she discovered was that Valerie had been attacked.
When the sister went in, and she actually went into the room and called out. She just actually couldn't work out why Valerie wasn't responding to her calling her name. Saw her legs out of the duvet, felt her and realised she was actually very, very cold. Straight away thought something's happened here, and then made the horrific discovery.
She'd been brutally attacked, and she could see that by the amount of blood that was around Valerie's face and head. So she immediately called 999.
They couldn't actually work out how many times she'd actually been hit around the head. But again, with this scene, what's unusual is because there would have been a lot of blood, but there was no blood outside the bedroom. So it wasn't like the sister or the brother had come down and seen blood trails or anything outside. There was absolutely nothing to be seen. Everything was contained within the bedroom.
So they would have had to have closed the crime scene down and very tactfully got the family out of there in order that the scene can be preserved, that a cordon officer could be put on the front and nobody allowed into that premises unless they had to be there. Before they even thought about moving Valerie's body, those forensic investigators, the crimes of scenes officers, would have to ensure that any potential evidence on her body is recovered, meaning they take swabs. They're making sure that if there is any DNA, hairs on there, whatever it could be, linking Valerie and the suspect, that can't be lost before the body's moved. Now, that can mean that the body will be there for a number of hours, but that's the only way to do it.
In a situation like this, the police arrive, they cordon off the crime scene, They will send in the forensic investigators to gather as much forensic evidence they can. They'll try and collect any physical evidence from the crime scene. The police will then start looking for any other exhibits that may be relevant to the murder, in this case a murder weapon. They will interview any witnesses, in this case it would be Valerie's family who were in the house at the time.
There is potential forensic evidence on the body. There will be initial visual examination of the body. In this particular case, her body was taken to the mortuary.
Valerie's body is taken for an autopsy. Detectives are hoping it will provide more details about her final moments.
A special post-mortem would now take place of Valerie's body, an examination to establish a number of things. First off, how did Valerie die? What caused her death? But they'd also be looking at questions like, what were the circumstances around it? Are the injuries on Valerie's body able to give us an indication of what may have gone on? And it was examining these injuries that the forensic pathologist was starting to build up a picture of Valerie's last moments. From looking at the injuries to her head, he was able to establish that in actual fact it was a hammer that was used to bludgeon Valerie. But what they also established is that she had defensive injuries, the sorts of injuries that you get when you put your hands up instinctively to stop the blows, be it from a hammer, from a knife or anything, coming at you. And it's these injuries that they will be looking for to indicate that actually when this attack happened, Valerie was awake, she was conscious, she was trying to defend herself, which for me makes it even more chilling because you start to think about the fear that she would have gone through in those last moments.
During the post-mortem examination, it would be what they call a forensic post-mortem, and that would be not only looking for the cause of death, but also what was used to cause the death. In this particular case, the pathologist determined that the blunt trauma injuries were caused by the round head of a claw hammer. It was determined that she was killed around midnight. There would be a number of factors that they would look at. The pathologist would look at the decomposition of the body. There's certain procedures that happen to bodies which they go through after they've died. The pathologist will be able to look at these and recognise these features and will be able to sometimes determine a time of death.
Though the post-mortem has been completed, police continue to sift through crucial clues in hopes of uncovering the truth. As the investigation deepens, the search for the killer remains in full swing. Police are investigating the murder of 55-year-old artist and grandmother Valerie Graves, whose body was discovered by her sister in a bed at an upscale property. They were house-sitting in Bosham, West Sussex, on December 30th, 2013. The investigation is now underway, and the news of the horrific murder spreads quickly in this small village, where crime is extremely rare.
A community like Bosham, like any other sort of seaside small village, knows that during the winter it is just them, and there'll be an element of people that might arrive during the summer. But during the winter time, which is very important, and we're talking about December, so it's Christmas time, literally the people just there would have been the locals, the people that live there. So to hear that there's been a murder, or even somebody being assaulted, but a murder in a place like that, that's unheard of. That is a definite, it doesn't happen here, not here.
It was a particularly violent crime, but the actual sort of severity of it, at the time, we weren't aware of, just quite how bad it was, because it was dreadful. The whispers was that it was a burglary gone wrong, or no one really knew. But it was just seemed such a extreme reaction. Everyone was sort of saying, well, if it's a burglary gone wrong, why didn't whoever it was just leg it?
You've got to sit down with the community. You've got to say, well, look, we don't believe you're in any danger. We don't believe you've got a serial killer out here. They're going to have this belief. It's going to be very hard for some people to even to sleep at night. It's going to be very hard for them to actually go back to their normal life because they've gone from having no police cars ever visiting them apart from the local Bobby who might say good morning to you, to actually having the scenes of crime with all these police cars, everything's happening. And then everybody leaves. But they're left there. Somebody has been murdered on their doorsteps and they haven't found out or have any leads, any more ongoing leads as to who may have done it.
The police initially would have looked at a number of different theories as to what happened. They're trying to build up as big a picture as possible. They were aware that Valerie was there with her family. They had to keep an open mind. They had to think, was there an argument between Valerie and a member of her family the night before? Did things get out of hand, resulting in Valerie's death?
Having completed the post-mortem and learning of the violent nature in which Valerie was killed, police discover something that they feel may be a serious breakthrough in the case.
Well, days after the murder, the police got their first lucky break. And it was a search that took place around 600 metres away from the property. They found a red claw hammer, 16-inch claw hammer. And it was found in a water-filled lane which had been filled with water due to the recent flooding.
And after 600 metres of inch by inch, hands and knees, searching the areas that the killer may have fled, they found a hammer. A hammer was in an indentation to the side of the road, submerged in some water.
Each day that passes, the opportunity to get forensic evidence diminishes. However, police did have a lucky break because when the hammer was examined, they found blood on it that belonged to Valerie Graves, and they also found a partial DNA profile that, when examined, showed that it belonged to a male.
So they were able then to obviously bag that up, send it in to be examined, and of course what was found was, one, the DNA from Valerie, so therefore they know they've now got the murder weapon, but two, they also found the DNA, but albeit what's called partial DNA, which means it can be useful, but it cannot be used in evidence. So they knew they had the murder weapon, which is something now they can start on.
One of the theories behind the murder was that this was in fact a burglary that had gone wrong, and that Valerie unwittingly had disturbed a burglar within the premises. And which was particularly unusual in this case is that if we look at that theory, the burglar didn't actually take any property from the premises.
The police didn't come up with an awful lot of information going door to door. A lot of people didn't see or hear anything, and a lot of people didn't have a lot of information about their neighbours. They were described as people who just kept themselves to themselves, quite a private people. So the police didn't get a lot of useful information from that exercise. The police initially obviously would have kept an open mind, and they would have been speaking to Valerie's family members who were in the house at that time. And it became apparent to the police that there were no crocodile tears here. This was a genuinely devastated family who loved Valerie, and they were being very open and honest with their movements the night before and the morning when the murder was discovered.
They took the statements. There may have been a bit of disbelief that he didn't hear anything, but then, of course, the evidence that's in front of them, you'd believe it because, one, that sort of attack produces a lot of blood and a lot of spray blood. If anybody from that inside the house had done it, they would have taken that blood with them, which means you would have seen a trail or you'd have smelt bleach for cleaning up. There was none of this. So there was at this stage absolutely no reason to disbelieve anything that her sister's partner or her mother said.
Police also knew that Valerie Graves was not actually meant to be there, that she was only house sitting, that she didn't own the house, and ordinarily she wouldn't have been there that night. She was house sitting as a favour to the Chamberlain family. So the police had to also consider the possibility, were the Chamberlain family the targets of this murderous attack? Police did look into the Chamberlain family and spoke to them, and they were obviously able to assert that they were in Costa Rica, where they were meant to be at the time of the murder. And in speaking to them, they didn't find anything that stood out as to why they themselves would be targeted. A local reporter, however, did discover that Malcolm Chamberlain had potentially used the house as something to feature on a swingers website, that it was a place that sex parties could be held and things like that. Police were considering, was the killer someone who had been to the property at one of these sex parties and had cased the joint out and then returned at a later date.
Strangers or other people may be aware of that property. So you're starting to eliminate individuals, and that will also speed up the possibility of discovering who actually committed the crime.
In a murder inquiry, once a suspect has been identified, it's a big decision to then go ahead and arrest them for murder and take them into custody. Police are very aware that the local communities will talk about this, and sometimes people can be convicted in people's minds before this investigation has completed its course and gone to trial.
It was very, very, very worrying for everyone, and everyone sort of, you're sort of looking over your shoulder the whole time, wondering who it might have been, and everyone was chatting and saying, oh, well, this, that and the other. Could be this, could be that, and there's rumours everywhere.
In January 2014, police arrested a local man, Daniel Pereira, and they questioned him for 3 days and then released him, and he was exonerated. He lived nearby to the crime scene, and he was a local manual labourer.
Daniel Pereira is arrested, as it was assumed that given his profession, he could have owned the claw hammer. He is released when investigators confirm the only evidence they have against him is circumstantial. But the accusation leaves both personal and public scars.
Without a doubt, he was exonerated, and then, of course, suffered the trauma of years after that, going through all this, in many ways, hatred, because people still believe no smoke without fire.
Daniel said that this arrest had destroyed his life, basically. He said he lost his job, he lost his home, he was frightened of people trying to harm him because he was under suspicion, and he later was admitted to a psychiatric ward. Police decided to do a mass DNA screening, starting from the local area of Bossum itself and then expanding to the surrounding areas. They encouraged local people to come forward, and local men, 17 plus. That resulted in over 2,000 people coming forward. People would have been so shocked and horrified and eager to help that they were more than willing to give their DNA as part of this process.
Many murders have been solved as a result of screening, but this is voluntary. You can't force somebody to give DNA. In this case, it's like the whole village wanted to turn up, and the surrounding areas. And of course, we always work on the adage, if you've got nothing to hide, you won't mind giving your DNA.
Despite extensive efforts of police, including the mass DNA screening of men from the local areas, and 9,500 people interviewed in relation to the murder, investigators seem to be at a dead end.
At this stage, the inquiry becomes exhausted. They've looked at all the lines of inquiries and they've got no real leads at this stage. But the family, being a close-knit family, want to still keep this in the public's eye and would, on the anniversary of her death, post leaflets around the village and try to get as much media attention as they possibly could.
Well, the case had gone cold, but police had went on the Crime Watch UK television programme to have a major appeal and a reconstruction. Her family, on the 1 year anniversary, they put posters out and about, they made more appeals through the media to get people talking again. Her family did go to great efforts to ensure that this case did not just go stone cold. They wanted to keep Valerie's name out there, they want people to talk about it.
In September 2018, the murder investigation team receive some luck. They receive a telephone call.
You'll always say in any investigation you need a bit of luck. And that can be a witness, that can be a bit of DNA, that can be a fingerprint, that could be absolutely anything. And in this case, in many ways, it wasn't luck. It's because it was wow. It was like a wow factor. Has this really occurred?
In September 2018, they received an email from a woman in Romania, and she told the police that she was pretty convinced that her husband had carried out the murder of Valerie Graves.
Has this really occurred? Have we really got somebody contacting us to say, my husband is a murderer? That doesn't happen. Especially when you consider, as I said, it was the wife of the individual, Christian Sabu, and who's contacted the police.
Could Christian Sabu have actually been the person that killed Valerie?
The investigation into Valerie Graves' murder has gone cold for 5 years. But suddenly, detectives receive a lead from a woman living thousands of miles away in Romania, who believes her husband is guilty of the crime. Could this be a hoax, a mistake, or has she been living with a killer this whole time? In 2018, Sussex Police reopened the investigation into the 2013 murder of 55-year-old artist Valerie Graves, who died by blunt force trauma at the hands of an intruder at a property she was house-sitting in Bosham, a coastal village near Chichester. The gruesome discovery was made by her sister on December 30th, 2013. But despite investigators' best efforts, the case went cold. Now, 5 years later, police receive a tip from a woman in Romania who suspects her husband, Christian Sabu, may be the killer.
Inquiries are made into Sabu, and it's established that he did live in the UK, just outside Chichester. He lived in a mobile caravan together with his wife.
Christian Sabu was a handyman, living in a caravan on a construction site, doing some odd jobs. Probably missed home a bit, probably wasn't the life that they wanted. However, what we do know is that also they were short of money at the time.
He earned his living by doing odd jobs around the village, and in fact it was established that he had been inside the Chamberlain's house, the murder scene, and conducted certain works within the premises.
Well, what was he doing at this time? And what they were able to establish that, yes, he was living in the Bosham area, not actually that far from the scene of the crime.
Christian Sabu's wife became concerned when she found alarming searches on his internet history and decided to confront him about it.
She realised that a number of weeks after the murder, they left the area and they eventually went back to Romania. They had a family and they lived a pretty normal life. But she realised that he was continuously going on his computer and using Google search to look up the murder of Valerie Graves. She was wondering why he was so interested in this particular murder. And obviously she was aware of it because they had lived not far from where it happened, when it happened. She then noticed that he looked at a photograph as part of the articles. The photograph was of the murder weapon, the red claw hammer. And she recognised the hammer. She knew that he had such a hammer. And she asked him, "Didn't you have a hammer like that?" And he got quite agitated and quite defensive. But eventually, he confessed to her what he had done and that he had killed Valerie Graves.
Now, there is belief that the marriage wasn't harmonious, but of course, he had no previous convictions, 2 children, family life, but of course, this wife has stood up and said, hang on a minute, and she's made the call to the police to say, I believe my husband is responsible for the murder of Valerie Graves.
He told her that he didn't mean to hurt her. He had money difficulties and he had been led to believe that at this period of time the house would be empty, that the owners were going abroad, and his plan was to travel to the property, to break in and to go to the safe to get some money out and any other valuables that he could lift and bring back to the caravan with him.
If you're breaking into a house, immediately you know you're going to be in some kind of emotional state. Your adrenaline's going to be going. You're scared, you're frightened, you're nervous. He goes in there in this emotional state to some level or other. He goes in expecting it to be empty, but then he sees Valerie. And I can picture the panic. I can picture the emotion.
On the night of the murder, he had been consuming alcohol and he went and got on his bicycle and cycled from the caravan site on the A27 to Smugglers Lane in Bossum.
My belief is the claw hammer was used to gain entry. So he's gone around the back of the house and shock, there's somebody here, because it goes into the bedroom. He may not have known, if he hadn't been in the house before, that was the bedroom, and he saw Valerie.
He would have left the house after his ferocious attack on Valerie. He would have threw the hammer into the watery lane, hoping that it would stay underwater and not be found. He cycled obviously back to the caravan and would have acted like everything was okay, that nothing was out of the ordinary. But a number of weeks later, with the investigation in full flow, he and his wife fled the area.
Since there was no direct evidence linking Sabu to the murder of Valerie Graves back in 2013, the family's relocation to Romania shortly after the crime did not raise suspicion. But now, after his wife's admission, investigators must gather forensic evidence to connect him to the crime.
To actually be able to have him arrested, you need a European arrest warrant. However much they want to believe the wife saying that my husband did that isn't enough, they've got to do something else. Now you've got another wow factor comes into this. This isn't luck, this is incredible. The fact that they know they've got this partial DNA which they've kept. They cannot request his, he can say no to it. So they turn around to Mrs. Sabu and say, look, we need some assistance here. We totally accept what you say, but to be able to act on it and to be able to give him perhaps the help that he needs, then I think we need some DNA.
The information that Sabu's wife was giving the police in the UK, if he was here, would have been enough for them to arrest him. But the fact he was in Romania meant that wasn't possible. They could get a European arrest warrant, but in order to do that, the evidence that you present to court has to be enough that they could be charged. The evidence is strong enough that they can go straight to trial. And they weren't at that stage. Yes, they had the admission to the wife, and the wife could have given them some information, but they needed more. They needed more evidence to link Sabu to Valerie's murder.
When they did inquiries with the Romanian authorities, his DNA wasn't on their database, so they needed to obtain a sample of the DNA. And so, with consent of the wife, they obtained DNA from the two children.
Familial DNA is when a DNA sample that belongs to a relative or a loved one of the offender or the suspect is connected to the crime scene. In this instance, the police, when they got the samples of Christian Sabu's children and compared those samples with the partial DNA sample they took from the hammer, they saw enough similarities in the two DNA profiles to know that there is some evidential link here between Sabu's DNA and the DNA found on the hammer.
Scientists were able to say, yes, this partial match is a relation of those two children, meaning that combined with the evidence that was given to them from the wife was enough for them to be able to go to the Crown Prosecution Service and say, we have enough evidence to charge. They say yes. They can then go to the court, get a European arrest warrant, and get him extradited back to the UK.
July 10th, 2019, Sabu is arrested in his home in Romania. He is very cooperative. He doesn't kick up a fuss. He doesn't deny anything. In fact, if anything, he is believed to have said on his arrest, his initial arrest, I didn't mean to hurt her. And he is then extradited to the United Kingdom and questioned by British detectives.
Sabu may have told Romanian police upon his arrest that he killed Valerie Graves, but didn't intend to hurt her. But now, on British soil, it is time for him to confess what really happened that night and face the victim's family in court. In July 2019, Cristian Sabu was extradited from Romania back to England to face charges for the 2013 murder of 55-year-old Valerie Graves, who had been brutally beaten to death with a claw hammer while house-sitting in Bosham, West Sussex, in December 2013. The investigation took a critical turn when Sabu's wife contacted police after discovering incriminating evidence in his internet search history. Investigators then matched Sabu's DNA to the sample recovered from the crime scene. Now in custody in the UK, it is time for questioning.
After 9 days in custody in Romania, Sabu was extradited back to the UK. And it's here he's charged with Valerie's murder, and he's now going to either have to stand trial or plead guilty.
Valerie Graves' surviving family members, who were with her the night of the murder, are present in the courtroom.
He stands up in court and tells his version of events. He maintains that he didn't mean to hurt her. He said that he was startled when he discovered she was there. He said he had been drinking alcohol, and he said he had money troubles, and his intention was purely to burgle the property.
On the 11th of November 2019, at Chichester Crown Court, Sabu pleaded guilty to the murder of Valerie Graves. In his summing up, the judge described Sabu's actions in that it was his greed that led to him being in that house, and it was his lack of conscience that led to him murdering Valerie in that way. In the UK, there's only one sentence for a conviction of murder, and that's life imprisonment. But in the UK, life generally doesn't mean life. Minimum tariff will be set by the judge. And on this occasion, Sabu was given a minimum term of 24 years.
In November 2019, Judge Christine Lying delivered the final verdict. The sentencing is an emotional moment for the family of Valerie Graves, who, in the wake of her death, had to endure years without answers as to who killed their loved one and why.
He was described as someone that was very quiet. Obviously, he was being translated when he was being spoken to by detectives and meeting with his defence team in England, but even his translators were saying this is quite a quiet, calm, cool man, a very normal individual. There was nothing out of the ordinary with him, and yet he did such an extraordinary, evil thing.
He goes to courts. He goes from Brighton Magistrates Court to Lewes Crown Court, where he's pleaded guilty, and he is sentenced to life and serve a minimum of 23 years. Now that means he's going to be in his mid-50s when he's out. Now that, to me, is no age. Should he stay for longer? Should he actually do life? Well, that will be debated by many, many people. But I think in this case, had he not pleaded to murder, I think he possibly would have been found guilty of manslaughter rather than murder. That's my own opinion. But when you consider that I think the hammer was taken to actually not be used as a weapon but to gain entry, and the fact that I think had he been assessed, there would have been an element of not really remembering what he'd actually done.
The family were obviously relieved that Valerie's killer had been caught. But I think they were in great sorrow that they had lost a much-loved mother, sister and grandmother. And Valerie's mother, sadly, never got to see the day her killer was convicted in court.
Although Valerie Graves' murder has finally been solved, the case has had a lasting impact on the tight-knit community of Bosham.
When somebody is sentenced for murder, what will usually happen is a victim impact statement will be read out from friends, from loved ones, from the family of the victim to describe that exact thing, the impact that it's had on them. What Valerie's family describe is the turmoil, the pain they'd been through for those 5 or 6 years leading up to the conviction, and the fact that they'd had their mother, their grandmother, one of the anchors in their life taken away from them, and that's a life that's just been snuffed out by this man.
Valerie Graves was in the wrong place at the wrong time. That is so sad. And then for the police to be able to say, right, where are we with this? Is it the family? Is it someone from the village? Is it a stranger? Is it a burglar? There was so much, but they didn't have the evidence at that stage. It's quite ironic for Bosham, as the little village it is. It's known for the beauty, the idyllic place that it is, that you can go to retire, you can go for a second home, and you will enjoy your life in Bosham to the extent you don't need to lock your front door, because that was the safety that you had. It was the safety of numbers in the sense of the village people. You know each other, wonderful place to live. The only crime aspect was known from TV shows like Midsummer Murders or Poirot. Now, unfortunately, there will always be that, or for locals especially, but other people who know Bosham, that it was known for this horrendous, violent murder that took place in a wonderful, beautiful house in a beautiful little village.
Even the most beautiful places that are full of light and tranquility and peace, unfortunately those places have that dark chapter of their history. And unfortunately with Bosham, the murder of Valerie Graves will be forever associated with it and will forever be part of its dark history.
As an experienced murder investigator, when I look at the work that had been carried out by Sussex police in convicting Sabu, I understand just how much they went through. The mass screening would have created a huge amount of work. The searching that went on in order to find the hammer, the amount of investigation that they did, I just take my hat off to them because it was an outstanding investigation.
As we know, her mother unfortunately was unable to even know the outcome of this. She passed away, and you grieve. Grief never disappears. There is an element of closure because the 4 or 5 years in between before they actually came to understanding what had actually happened, you don't know. You want an answer. Everybody wants an answer of some sort, so they got an answer. That doesn't mean the grief disappears because you still have lost a loved one. But they're able to get some sort of closure on the fact that they know what happened, in many ways, why it happened, and who did it. But that closure will not mean closure from grief.